Immer, immer muss ich durch Straßen gehen und immer spüre ich, da ist einer hinter mir her. Das bin ich selber und verfolgt mich lautlos. Aber ich höre es doch. Ja, manchmal ist mir, als ob ich selber hinter mir herliefe. Ich will davon, von mir selber davonlaufen. Aber ich kann mir nicht entkommen. Muss den Weg gehen, den es mich jagt. Muss rennen, endlose Straßen. Ich will weg. Und mit mir rennen die Gespenster von Müttern, von Kindern. Die gehen nie mehr weg. Die sind immer da. Immer. Nur nicht Ruhe. Wenn ich...
Hello and welcome to the Bloody Bits Horror Show. I am your host, Eddie, the Axe Jefferson. Joining me as always, that long, lingering shadow, Tim Yobo, ladies and gentlemen.
What's going on there? I think you need to learn where that button is on the new soundboard for your axe sound, right?
I need to upgrade my computer. This week, for week 2 of March Madness, we have a request by you, Tim Yobo. We're going to be discussing Fritz Lange's 1931 horror classic, M. But we are not alone on this journey. Of course, we are joined once again by Iago Faustus.
Hey, guys.
Hello, Faustus. I guess you're almost like an all-star now on the show, right? This is your 4th appearance.
I think so. Well, I'm happy to be traveling with you all into the dark, especially this week. This is the granddaddy of them all, I think, in terms of at least the serial killer movie, possibly also the police procedural. It is one of the most incredible and influential movies we've done so far.
Oh, you can watch movies now and see the fucking fingerprints of this movie all over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most modern horror, and I would say the entire film noir genre.
Yep.
A lot of it. So, Tim, this was your suggestion for March Madness. What's your history with this and why this film?
I remember seeing it on video when it came out, probably around 2000, somewhere around there. And just seeing it because it was supposed to be the big movie, like one of the original serial killer movies, and really enjoying it back then. But then I think it was on Tubi or Amazon about a month or so ago, and I started what the fuck? Let me watch it, and I completely forgot so much about that movie, and just watching it this time, the last time, it was just an incredible experience. And I texted you right away, can we do M on the show? You're like, surely. It's good to be a co-host.
Yeah, it's a wonderful pick. This film, by the way, one of the only films that is currently at 100 on Rotten Tomatoes and 95 for the People's Rotten Tomatoes as well. So, it's the big one, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody who hasn't seen it should definitely check it out. It's like I said, when you see it, there's going to be a million things that you've seen, and all these cop shows and TV movies about murderers and serial killers, and Silence of the Lambs got some stuff thrown into it.
Yeah. It's the fingers of the hand chalked with M reach quite far, all across many, many genres. So, Faustus, what about you? What is your history with this film?
I think I probably watched it for the first time on sort of like a film society screening in college. And then, I've seen it a number of times since then. The one that I'm working from for this one is the 2010 Criterion Collection Blu-ray. They have both a Blu-ray and a DVD with a lot of interesting additional commentary and some supplementary material. The movie has a very complicated physical history, and only recently have certain versions of it come to light that didn't exist. People thought it had been lost. But there was a French language version of this movie as well, and an English language version of this movie, both made at the same time as it was, essentially by Lange, And it was early in the sound era, so they were making these. It's a lot like they had these unusual practices where they would dub certain parts, they would reshoot certain parts with actors whose native language was the new one. And there were, so like a lot of the conversations would be reshot. And in the case of Peter Lorre and the famous scene with which Eddie opened this podcast,
Yes.
His agonized, abject self-exculpation, Peter Lorre simply did that in French and then did it again in English for the versions that came out, and then they've been rediscovered. So we now have a new candidate for Peter Lorre's first English performance.
So, and have you seen it?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
It's right there on the DVD. So if you can get the Criterion Collection disc, either the DVD or the Blu-ray, definitely do so because it's a great piece of film history. What to say about this? I mean, I can go on at some length. This seems to be it has a reputation for being the first serial killer movie. That may or may not be true. The first anything is always very hard in film, and there are a couple of early entries in the silent era that you might otherwise claim the title. But this does seem to be the one that everyone really remembers.
So this is kind of like Halloween and Black Christmas. Black Christmas was out before Halloween, but Halloween is the one that everybody saw and everybody remembers, and that's the first slasher.
Probably so. I mean, I looked around. Somebody found like a movie made in Portugal, of all places, in 1907 that has a sort of serial killer theme, and it's, maybe that guy did it first, but I had never heard of that one before, actually searching for it. So there it is. This is the one. We have M. What does it stand for? No one really knows. It sort of could be many things. It could be Metropolis. It could be in the sense of the giant city of Berlin where it takes place. Mörder, the murderer, which is to say the character played by Peter Lorre. Mensch, man. It's also, I think it might stand in some sense for modernität, modernity, because you have the serial killer as a kind of distinctly modern phenomenon in a way that Fritz Lange and the people who made this movie seem to understand. He's a kind of character that can only exist in a large, anonymous, urban environment. Mm-hmm. Stereotypically, the first people often think of as modern serial killers, Jack the Ripper in London, H.H. Holmes in Chicago, are urban figures. They don't live in little villages or anything like that. Because if you lived in a little village, you could never be a serial killer. You would be detected.
You don't have the pool to pull from as you do with but also, anonymous people running around London all the time and just picking them off.
Exactly. No anonymity, also no privacy. These are men who live in a world where privacy is possible. And travel is possible. Buffalo Bill, to take an example from a more contemporary serial killer movie, can drive around in his van covering thousands of square miles of territory looking for victims. That's not something you can do in, say, the Middle Ages. There's no roads, no van. It's just not really possible. So the serial killer is very much a modern figure. And Berlin, where this movie is set, is, I think, probably the almost the epitome of the modern city. It is an avant-garde place in the arts. It lives in the center of one of the most technologically advanced societies then on Earth. And so you are living in that particular world where, people are anonymous. People live in huge collectivities. People are alienated from each other. They don't really know each other. It's interesting that this is, again, a movie about policing and about bureaucracy to a huge extent. Mm-hmm. The serial killer can't exist in some ways in the past because there aren't police forces. There aren't people writing down formalized, standardized records that can be compared. And then they could say, oh, there's a murder over here and a murder over here and a murder over there.
Yeah, so there could have been plenty of serial killers who maybe weren't prolific, where they weren't killing like 50 or 100 people, but were just able to get away with it because there were no cops.
Right, because in 15th century Erfurt, there is no police department to call up the police in 15th century Leipzig or whatever. So the serial killer is being kind of, in some ways, created. There might have been people like that, as you say, but you couldn't detect them. Another way in which you can't detect them, in which modernity is different, is that there is mass media in modernity. All right? People are reading, they're writing newspapers, they're reading newspapers, they're seeing accounts of crimes, and when things happen, people compare what happens from
And put
time
two
to
and
time.
two together.
They put it together, and then it's like, typically. So Jack the Ripper is the first great media figure also in this way, right? He writes the newspapers. The London Metropolitan Police figure out that he exists, but it's really that, there's a newspaper culture that he lives in, and these people write about him. He becomes a great celebrity, even though nobody actually knows who he is. And that makes him unique. It makes him someone that can only exist probably from like the late 19th century on. It's very modern also, I think, in the sense that there's a huge emphasis in this movie about time. We are constantly seeing clocks.
Yep.
We are constantly seeing people referring to time. People call up and ask for the time. And we also see a lot, as a matter of media and time, we also see newspapers. Significantly, the one we see most often is something called Tempo, which was a real Berlin tabloid in 1930. Tempo meaning time. And if you have the right kind of edition, one of the things that something like the Blu-ray is really good for is you can read the dates off the newspapers. And as you read the dates and you can see them moving in succession, the whole of the action here is actually compressed into about a week of sort of real-world time. Yes, at least as measured by what we see of the newspapers that the characters read. So, media. Then there are other things that are not just modern, but that seem to me to be distinctively German. And as many critics have noted, the experience of the First World War is part of the psychic background of pretty much all of Weimar cinema. Weimar here referring to the German Republic that existed after the fall of the Kaiser in 1918, up until the time of the rise of Hitler in 1933. A very difficult time in German history, also an incredibly creative and dynamic time in the world of German culture, in ways that maybe have alienated a lot of people in German history, but that's the way it went. The First World War, we need to think about this very seriously whenever we look at a movie like M, because we are looking at a really traumatized society. Germany in the First World War had about 2 million war dead and 4 million war wounded. That's in a country that in 1914 had a population, I believe, of about 65 million. And the wounded number, of course, is only for physically wounded. We don't really have a way of estimating the number of psychiatric casualties.
Were they even really keeping track? Were they even considering something like that?
Probably not. Military psychiatry was sort of in its infancy at the time. There was a category recognized, at least among American and British forces, as shell shock, which was in effect a kind of psychiatric disability. I think that in Germany, it was much more thought of as men who could not perform or who fell apart in combat and may just have been, slackers. But there were, there must have been a huge number of psychiatric casualties in addition to the actual physical casualties. And to think about the scale of this, if you imagine comparing it to, say, the United States today, you suppose that the U.S. went to war, say against China. They fought for 4 years and lost. Okay, you'd have the equivalent number of dead for the United States would be 10 million. Okay, and the equivalent number of physically wounded, would be 20 million. And you'd probably have maybe another 10 million dead from like privation, hunger related to the war, and then some hard to estimate but probably very large number of psychiatric casualties. The society would be badly messed up. All right, just imagine what living in this country would be like if that happened. Well, if you try to imagine that, you get a sense of what living in Germany might have been like in, say, 1920s, 1930. The country's a mess. A lot of families would be broken. There'd be a lot of war orphans. There'd be a lot of widows. Every time you go out your front door, you would encounter a lot of beggars, crippled and hopeless war veterans. And as we note in this movie, we see there are a lot of beggars. A lot of them really are physically disabled, missing limbs and so forth. They're everywhere. That's central to how this movie plays out. And there are other traces of war trauma here. There are a lot of broken families. The little Elsie Beckmann doesn't appear to have a father.
She definitely does not have a father.
She's a little too young to be a war orphan, but she may not have a father for another reason, possibly just because there's a shortage of men in her mother's generation. And everywhere we look, we see beggars. Everywhere we look, we see economically marginal men and petty criminals. We see a lot of people with damaged bodies. And there's a lot of crime. And the authorities don't seem to get a lot of respect, which is probably what you'd expect when the last bunch of authorities led you into a war that got things screwed up that badly. There's a scene here that struck me. It's sort of minor, but it's a group of citizens mob a policeman, all right, and beat up someone that they suspect of being a child murderer on a very flimsy pretext. And it's very hard for me to imagine that happening in like pre-war Germany, right? The cop would those people had a lot of respect for authority. The cop would have said, "You people back off," and they would have. Here they turn into a mob. And there's a fascination with violence. There's a fascination with strength that I think comes out of the war experience. Easily a majority of men living in Germany in 1930 between the ages of 30 and 60 would have seen wartime military service in one of the most violent and destructive conflicts the world had known up to then.
Yeah, they saw some shit.
Yep. The political wounds left by the war left a lot of people, the war and its immediate aftermath, the collapse of Imperial Germany and the rise of the Weimar Republic through a process in which there was a failed communist revolution in 1919 in various places, left a lot of people feeling like violence was the redemptive solution to social problems. Obviously, the Nazis are very prominent here as the biggest proponents of this kind of worldview, but it's probably the case that there were a lot of people on the left as well. People close to Lange, like Bertolt Brecht, who have their own bitter memories of the recent past and who might be longing for a day of violent redemption. And we see also there's a fascination with crime, as we will see. Even Frau Beckmann reads crime serials. The man who comes to her door gives her the latest.
Yes, I have a note about that. Yeah.
Yep. And the most charismatic figure in this movie by far is a professional gangster. And he speaks in a kind of eliminationist rhetoric. The only way to deal with certain people is to wipe them out. And it's significant also that there is, in the culture of the time, one of the most important cultural works is the Three Penny Opera, which is to say the Brecht vile reworking of the original John Gay Beggar's opera, in which the hero, or at least the anti-hero, is also a charismatic gangster. And there's a tremendous artistic interest in things like madness as well. Post-traumatic stress disorder isn't really available as a category, but people were obviously messed up. Fritz Lange, who directed this movie, himself was a war veteran. He lost an eye in the war. So one of the greatest directors in history was a one-eyed man. Think of that. Actually had to recover from shell shock. And it's probably also an accident that one of the most important high cultural events in Berlin in the 1920s was the debut of Alban Berg's opera Wozzeck, this atonal masterpiece, which is the first opera in 300 years of opera to have it essentially be about working class people. And it's a story of a put-upon soldier who goes mad and murders the mother of his illegitimate child. So this is the huge background to the world in which this movie, out of which this movie emerges, and also in which this movie has been set. I hope that wasn't too lengthy. I hope it didn't feel a little too much like a sermon, but it just seemed that this is the sort of stuff that I could not help but think about as the many times that I've watched this movie.
Faustus, this is a fucking historical movie, so
yeah.
We want to hear the history on it.
A piece of art like this could only come from very fertile soil, and sometimes what fertilizes that soil isn't always necessarily happiness and lilacs.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
Plus, it's 1931, so I can't even remember back that time what was going on. So it's good to know what was taking place at the time, what set this mood for the movie.
So Got a couple of additional notes. I mean, I have notes on the cast from time to time, but I think we might do that in breakdown. Except for one thing, I wanted to talk about the producer a bit. Seymour Nebenzahl was actually American-born. He was German-Jewish. The family money really appears to have come from his father, who his grandson describes in a Criterion Collection interview as a butter and egg man. They went back to Germany in the 1920s, looking for business opportunities, and someone said, "Hey, why don't you produce movies?" And strangely enough, they decided to do so. They created the company called Narrow Film, which makes this movie. It's pretty much the only competition to the giant UFA consortium that made movies in
Was this
Germany.
the first movie that they produced?
No, they had produced a number before this. They had produced a number from G.W. Pabst, including Pandora's Box, the pioneering war film Westfront 1918. They did the film version of the Threepenny Opera. After this, they did the Testament of Dr. Mabuse. So they were active in moving both G.W. Pabst and Fritz Lange and other directors along.
And they were doing legitimate shit. They weren't like canon back then with like, hey, we want to make some money? Well, I was gonna invest in a factory. Yeah, why not produce some movies?
Well, they did, and they made some great ones. Seymour had to flee Germany in 1933, unsurprisingly. He went to Hollywood, and in Hollywood in 1951 he did a remake of M, or produced a remake of M, set in then contemporary Los Angeles. This movie is very hard to find. I've got a copy of it on order, but it's like they redid the whole thing with cab drivers apparently replacing beggars, and like the mob or whatever in Los Angeles being the appropriate organized crime figure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's apparently visually very interesting because it gives us a record of a now vanished Los Angeles neighborhood of old Victorian houses near downtown, a place that was called Bunker Hill, I believe. So I'm looking forward to looking at it for just those reasons. Yep. What other historical background? There were real historical serial killers in Germany. As you're probably aware, one who's probably the most apropos is someone named Peter Kürten.
That's the guy from like 1920?
He's active in the 1920s, or actually, it looks like between about 1913 and 1930, possibly longer. He was known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, or the Dusseldorf Monster. He killed a string of women and girls in the period we discussed. He also appears to have had a deep sexual attraction to blood and violence. And many aspects of his case show up in the fictional case in M. There were massive manhunts. At one point, the German police had a list of suspects of 900,000 names.
Oh, so anybody who was a guy.
Yeah, pretty much anybody in the general vicinity of Dusseldorf was a suspect. The perpetrator wrote to the press, just like they do in this movie. He actually provided a map to the remains of one of his victims. They did use a graphologist to link different cases of murder together. The investigation was contributed to by Berlin's chief inspector Ernst Bush, who was apparently one of Lange's principal models for the character of Karl Loman. Kürten was eventually caught and tried, and the verdict in his case came down on April 22nd, 1931, just 2 weeks before the premiere of M.
Wow, you can't buy publicity like that.
Nope. So, Ed Kürten was executed by guillotine in July 1931. There's another case a killer called Fritz Hahman, who's actually mentioned briefly by a police psychologist in the course of this movie. Hahman was known as the Vampire of Hanover. He was a cannibalistic serial killer of young men, at least 24 of them, whom he would lure to his apartment for sex before killing them with a bite to the Adam's apple and subsequent strangulations. And there are rumors that he sometimes sold his victims' flesh as contraband pork or horse meat, although, as far as I know, this has never been actually confirmed. And he was also
But
beheaded.
It helps to sell newspapers, because being a cannibal isn't enough.
Yep. So he was also executed by beheading in 1925. So, there's a lot
of serial killers back then.
Well, yeah. This was an era for him. One little bit more of trivia, which I just wanted to bring in, which brings us around to the modern day or near it. Peter, Laura, as you know, would have fled Germany in 1933 just like most other Jewish film personnel. He went to Hollywood. He would make a lot of movies. He would be a big celebrity there as well. And he had a daughter named Catherine Laurie. Now, in early November 1977, Catherine Laurie was walking home along Hollywood's Highland Avenue when she was stopped by two Los Angeles policemen, who, or at least they said they were policemen. They got out of their car. They showed Los Angeles cop badges. They said, "We're with the Vice Squad. We want to see your ID." So she went through her purse and she found various things. And one of the things she found was a photograph of herself as a little girl sitting on Peter Laurie's lap. And she explained, "This was my father. My name's Catherine Laurie. This is Peter Laurie." And so they look at it, they go back to their car for a minute, and then they bring the photograph back and said, "Okay, you can go." And then they drive away. Several months later, it transpires that the two guys who had pulled her over were not Los Angeles police officers, as you can probably guess. They were two individuals named Angelo Buono Jr. and his adoptive cousin, Kenneth Bianchi.
Bam.
All right? You know who those guys were, right?
Oh, yeah. Kind of famous serial killers in their own right?
Yep. They are collectively the Hillside Strangler, and they were apparently planning on abducting, raping and murdering Catherine Laurie. But when they found out who she was, at least according to one version of the story, they figured that the attention that would be generated by murdering the daughter of a famous celebrity was not something they wanted. So they let her go.
Too high profile. Wow.
Yep. So that's, talk about coming full circle.
That's why you should always carry pictures around with your parents.
Yes, if they're famous.
Provided they're famous. Yeah, I was just about to say.
All right, so just get a picture of somebody's famous holding a baby and say, "That's me."
Sure. So that and it's the sort of thing that if you wrote it into a story or a screenplay, they'd say, "Come on."
And nobody would ever believe it, and they'd tell you need to make it more grounded in reality. Yeah. All right. So wonderful. Thank you very much for so much of the history behind this film. Again, so I'll break it down for some of the more simple parts of it. This was, of course, made during kind of the rise of the fascist Nazi Party in Germany. Filmmaker Fritz Lange was of Jewish descent. He and his wife actually co-wrote and produced or directed this film, Thea von Harbou. And I have some notes here that their marriage didn't go so well. Because she sort of ended up becoming a sympathetic to the Nazi Party, and that didn't work very well for Fritz, of course. So they ended up.
Yeah, that's a kind of a deal breaker.
They ended up separating after that, but they had worked together before, and as you previously mentioned, Metropolis, which was his. I mean, a phenomenal film that really dealt a lot with the kind of strife between the upper and lower classes. Fritz recognizes this to be probably his greatest work in the film industry, and I have to agree. I think at this point we can start.
No argument from us.
We can start breaking down the film, unless you've got something, Tim.
No, I'm good to go.
Okay.
So where do we go? We open on a blank screen to the sound of a gong, which I guess, commentary apparently is recognized as German radio listeners would see this as the opening to the top of the hour news. And we look down into the courtyard of a working class tenement where there's a group of children. They're playing a count-out game, like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Except, a little girl in the middle of the circle counting out the children to a rhyme. And I'm going to give you my best effort at a transcription. My German isn't very good. But it sounds to me like Warte, warte, nur ein Weilchen. Bald kommt der schwarze Mann zu dir. Mit dem kleinen Hackerbeilchen macht Schaberfleisch aus dir. Wait just a little while. The black man, or the man in black, is coming for you. With his little cleaver, he's going to make you into hamburger. Significantly, by the way, the circle looks a bit like a clock, and this little girl is moving in a clockwise motion. So we have our first clock reference in the very first image of the film, and we also see children making a game of their own endangerment.
Well, I think that's just to show us that this is something that's been going on long enough that even the kids would know about it and would be making games about it too.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a note, by the way. This little girl who we see in the middle of the circle is uncredited, but her name is Hannah Maron. She was from a Jewish family that would emigrate from Germany in 1933 and settle in mandatory Palestine, later to become the part of it they settled in anyway, Israel. And she rose to great prominence as what is arguably the greatest single actress in Israeli theater, receiving Israel Prize in Theater and honorary doctorates from Tel Aviv and Ben Gurion universities.
And that's her first role.
Yep. An uncredited role doing a count-out game at the start of M. They're outside of school. I would note, by the way, that there's one thing, there's a washerwoman, or maybe just someone delivering laundry, leans over from a balcony. Would you stop doing that horrible song? And then you stop for a minute, and then as soon as she goes away, they start again. So she climbs up the stairs. She goes to the apartment of the Beckmann. Frau Beckmann is taking delivery of the laundry. And she says, this woman complains about the children and their horrible song. Mrs. Frau Beckmann says, well, at least as long as you can hear them, you know where they are.
And that's going to come back a little later.
Yep. So she goes about, she's finishing laundry, she's making soup. She looks up at the cuckoo clock on the wall, which strikes noon. And this matched almost immediately by the tolling of local church bells. Cut to outside of school,
where we have a bunch of parents
all picking up the. I thought it was just like lunch. I guess it's like the end of the school day at 12 o'clock.
Well, on Saturdays.
Okay.
On
I was
Saturdays,
like, wow, all those parents outside to pick them up for lunch. Everybody really is taking this serious.
Well, I think it's actually probably like the end of the Saturday session, and those do end at noon typically.
And there's a bunch of signs on the street asking who is the murderer.
But also remember, there's something here I'd like to note as well. Elsie leaves. All right, she's helped across the street after almost being run over. There's a helpful policeman comes up. Right. This is a sign, one hopes, of a well-ordered society. Police help little kids. But there's a hideous irony involved in the fact that he walks her across the street. In that she's bouncing her ball along, and she comes across a column plastered with various announcements and advertisements. Poor Elsie. No one to pick her up. She has to find her way across the city by herself.
Bouncing her ball along the way, bounces it across a column. And, we see on that column there is a poster. And this poster asks, who is the murderer?
Mm-hmm.
And she's picking up her ball. And what looms large over this poster but a shadow? A
shadow. Du hast ein schöner Ball. Wie heißt du denn? You have a pretty ball. What's your name? And she, a nice child says, Elsie Beckmann. And we see it's Peter Laurie who's been looming over her. A note, by the way, Elsie Beckmann, just another casting note. She is played by a child actress. She's named Inga Landgut. And she would go on to have a distinguished career I wrote this in my notes, as an adult actress in Germany. That's misleading. She worked mostly in television. And in later life, she did a lot of dubbing work for English language films. She did the German voice of Miss Moneypenny in James Bond films.
Wow.
She did
That's a moneymaker.
Yep. She was the voice of Miss Ellie Ewing in the German version of the American soap opera Dallas. and possibly one of the most entertaining of all, she was also Wilma Flintstone in the German language dub of the Flintstones.
Wow.
So
she's a superstar.
Which, in case you're wondering, is called Die Familie Feuerstein in German.
What, the family's made out of rock?
Well, Firestone, right? Or Flintstone. You can look it up on YouTube if you want to hear middle-aged Inga Landgut being Wilma Flintstone. So,
The voiceover work as compared to the adult film industry, I guess it's a living.
Yeah. But she was not an adult actress. She was an actress as an adult working in German television. So
and the question really here is who is the murderer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because and a lot of the notes I have in my rewatching of this are kind of thematic. We have a lot of and especially for its era, it's very stark. A lot of people, a lot of neighbors turning each other in. A lot of people pointing the fingers at each other and at other strangers in the street.
But Eddie, I think you get this a lot of times when you have something like this, when like the police put like a mass like dragging out, like, you know, for the Hillside Stranglers, for Ted Bundy, you had girlfriends turning their boyfriends in, wives turning husbands in. So I think it's just like gave everybody an excuse for either anybody who they thought was weird or just for payback and being a fucking looking for revenge on somebody.
So that's one theme I'd like to just put a pin in. We'll go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we go back to the streets, and Peter Laurie is following her, and he begins whistling a jaunty tune.
Yes, it's from the Peer Gynt suite. It's from the Hall of the Mountain King. And we have intercuts between this and the apartment where Frau Beckmann is making lunch. She hears footsteps on the stairs, their kids running up the stairs. No Elsie, however. Hans Beckhout, that is to say Peter Laurie's character, is buying a balloon for Elsie.
When I saw this part, I was like, all right, we have to do it. We have to do it on the show. Just from this, how they did this whole fucking thing with the balloon.
Mm-hmm. I would say the balloon, and then just the filming. So many of the angles that they use in here inform what horror will become, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, specifically, like a lot of the shots of the empty stairway, like you said, or with the dinner being set in the empty chair, and then eventually her ball rolling into an empty field.
Yeah, because I think it goes from the empty chair to the empty staircase to like an empty, looks like the laundry room or something, and then you see the ball just rolling, and then the balloon going up in the air and getting caught in the electrical wires, and you know exactly what just happened.
In fact, you have premonitions of it earlier on. There's another thing that we should note that happens in the course of these intercuts, which is that the doorbell rings on the Beckmann apartment, and you see Frau Beckmann run to the door. She thinks maybe Elsie has lost her key or whatever. Maybe this is the way she always comes in. It's not Elsie. It's a man named Herr Gauka, who is delivering the latest number of a serial crime magazine that Frau Beckmann presumably reads. It may be one of the few like diversions in what otherwise seems like kind of a bleak life.
Was this a thing? Because I was like, is he delivering books? Like it's like a magazine subscription with delivering?
He's delivering like the equivalent of a pulp magazine. Every like week or something like that, he comes by and he drops off another one. That's his job. And she, presumably Frau Beckmann reads these things as they come out. And so we have the horrendous irony that, Frau Beckmann is reading a crime serial while a real serial killer is in the process of doing it her daughter.
True crime is happening right under her nose while she distracts herself with fiction.
With fictional crime.
Well, yeah, that's what makes it more attractive. That's what's going to draw more people to it, because now they got the whistle wetted from the newspapers, and now here's some guy coming knocking on my door, bringing it right to my house.
Yeah, and then I have, after the ball rolling, we cut to the newsies the next day.
Extra Ausgabe, running down the street. Extra edition. And people are, of course, mobbing the newsies. They want to get the news. But
you don't just get the news. You got to subscribe to know, sir. Mm-hmm. You can't read the article that talks about the killer that might be in your neighborhood. You got to pay for it. It's great advertising. So now we cut back to Peter Laurie, and he's writing a letter while he whistles his jaunty tune of "In the Hall of the Mountain King." And it's funny, because I saw this movie years and years and years and years ago, and because of my horrible lack of culture, what it reminded me of is the game Mountain King on the Atari 2600.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Which is funny because then if you start going into the history of horror in video games, it is largely considered to be one of the first horror video games, which is funny because in the Hall of the Mountain King, there's nothing that necessarily horrific about it. It's
I don't even think I remember that game at all.
yeah. I'm just saying for the song itself, but
although it marks something very frightening in the play Peer Gynt, because like an army of trolls or something is coming to like tear the protagonist apart or something like that. And this is the music that was written along with it.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have him writing a letter. And the note that I have is he just has better handwriting than I do. He really does.
Same here. I've always been told, Eddie, though, that the more smart you are, the worse your handwriting.
No, that's
why
true.
you can never read doctors' prescriptions or anything that they write down, right?
Don't the science behind like assessing a person's intelligence or anything about them based on their handwriting is not a science. I'm a
Kind
moron.
of like measuring skulls.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
don't tell that to the graphologist we're going to meet later on.
the graphologist. Oh yes, I have so many notes on that guy. He's clearly projecting. So yeah, so in his letter, he's very forthright that he is not thrilled with the press because he had written to them before, and he said, "Look."
No, he wrote to the police, and the police didn't
that's right.
put it in the newspaper. So now he's just cutting out the middleman. He's just going straight to the newspapers.
Yeah. He says, "Look, and I'm gonna keep doing this because you guys need to publish my work. What I'm talking about here, or I'm going to continue, basically." And it's interesting because it strikes as like a cry for help, a little bit more than just a taunting, right? So, and the other note I have is it reminds me of with Jack the Ripper, Saucy Jack, the everybody's folk hero of his era. There were so many accounts of fake letters that were being written and given to the press, not to mention of the press themselves writing their own fake letters just to sell newspapers.
Well, it's got to be a gigantic moneymaker and a chance for... Oh, you're always going to have the crazies who are going to come out of the woodwork for something like that.
Yes.
And you're going to have the grifters and the con men who are coming out trying to sell fake letters.
There's
And
apparently...
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay.
If you read, there's apparently in the 1990s, film scholars discovered an omitted scene from this movie, not in celluloid, but in the censorship cards given to the state of Prussia censors to get the movie approved, in which you have Karl Loman ranting about the fact that they're getting thousands of fake letters.
Well, I think at one point they do go into that whole thing with all
Yep.
the letters that they're getting, and it's all like bullshit and just gossip.
Yep. The civilian cooperation. Yeah, he's pretty mad about it. So yeah, there's all that going on. So what happens immediately? The press prints the letter, right? And what part of the press prints the letter? Tempo. That tabloid we're going to be seeing over and over again. There's the news, which is posted again on like a poster wall. And there's something very weird going on here. I mean, you've got a mob of people reading it, but there's also an irony, which is that if you know a little German, it becomes a little more salient, that the placard announcing the murder is surrounded by placards of other kinds. And these are all announcing various agreeable diversions that are available to you if you live in Berlin. Dancing lessons, boxing matches, cabarets, and so forth. And there seems to be a kind of sly suggestion here that serial murder might in its own way just be another one of those diversions for many of the people here.
Or that's also something that's like this is prime time to put your ad up here because this is where the newspaper's coming out with all the juicy details every day.
Yep.
So everybody's going to be coming to this billboard to read instead of going to the billboard across the street that's not giving all the juicy details.
Yep.
Tim, are you suggesting this is all clickbait?
Could be, right?
Serial
Original
murder.
clickbait.
Serial murder as entertainment. Called out in a movie, which is serial murder as entertainment.
Well,
Really-
it's enough of a business that there's some dude walking around fucking Berlin and Dusseldorf selling fucking crime novels out of his backpack.
Right. Well, it's a living. Cut to a Stammtisch. Tim, you may have seen I sent you like an illustration. I said I looked at this when I was rewatching the movie and said, these guys, they're sitting around a table smoking and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I said,
the amount of smoke in this movie.
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, this doesn't even get a tenth of it. I said to this though, this is right out of George Gross, and I sent him a picture, to illustrate an ink illustration from George Gross. That looks exactly like that. And then, God damn it, like the commentary track on Criterion put on said exactly the same thing. I feel like it's a hack.
No, you said it first. So unless you've already saw the Criterion collection,
no.
then you said it. You're not a hack.
It's just what I thought.
It means you could work for Criterion doing commentary on their movies.
That wouldn't be bad. But well, I guess I'll have to like write some more film criticism or something before they'll consider me. But anyway, the Stammtisch, we get more of a sense of the mob atmosphere because a fight breaks out among the drinkers, one of whom accuses the other of following a little girl up the stairs of her apartment building. So obviously society is falling apart.
Yeah.
And then we cut to another scene where we see some working class Berliner, someone named Jaeger, complaining about having a search warrant served on him. And the detective doing the search, who I think is the same Inspector Graber who we're going to see a lot more of later in the movie.
I believe it is, yeah.
Yep. Played by Theodor Loos, who would reappear in Long's Testament of Dr. Mabuse. I just lost my place here. He said he's explaining very patiently, look, we have to conduct all these searches. There's a child killer out there. We have to do all these things. And things, meanwhile, become more and more hysterical in Berlin. A little girl stops and asks a dapper little man the time. Another element of gives it to her, that he's promptly confronted by this huge working class man.
Yeah.
The size differences being emphasized by Long by using wildly exaggerated camera angles.
Yes. Yeah.
He's like Andre the Giant.
Yep. Although in one shot you see that they're really only about a foot in height apart. And he basically, so this guy.
Well, I think you're right there, Faustus. But
Yeah.
I think when you first see him, you're seeing him from the old man's point of view. So I think that's why it looks like he's gigantic and towering over him.
Right. So this degenerates, and then a bus pulls up, and a cop has just collared a guy for being a pickpocket. Somebody says the word child murder, and it just degenerates into the mob scene that we've seen before.
Yeah, it's basically a montage of everybody laying the blade on any neck that they can find. And this is really it's so funny how cyclical this kind of a mentality in a culture is, and we see it repeated over and over and over again. Conspiracy theory grows from this fear culture that is perpetrated by, the news trying to make a buck as well.
Clickbait.
Yeah. Is entertainment killing children, or is killing children entertainment?
Inquiring minds want to know.
Exactly, and that's like you said. That's kind of where we're at here, and yet our killer remains uncaught.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what do? We've tried just blaming everybody that tangentially could potentially be a suspect. I suppose at this time we should probably figure out what evidence, if any, we have and call in the experts.
Right. So now it's becoming political.
Mm-hmm.
We get a close-up on Beckert's letter, now reproduced in facsimile on the front page of Tempo. We can read the date on Tempo, by the way. It's Monday, November 17th, 1930. Someone, Russian Minister of the Interior, is yelling at the Berlin Chief of Police on the phone. And the chief of police is busy defending the work of his department by going into what is basically looks like a police training film, a montage of police methods, fingerprints, and then we get the police graphologist. I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought he looked like Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
Before whatever accident put him in his wheelchair. And he's just, he's going on and on about sexual pathology through handwriting.
Yeah, the quote that he has about the sexual pathology from the handwriting, by the way, it's this pseudoscience phrenology stuff is I don't know why it is. He says the aforementioned diamond-shaped and swelling swoops, clearly seen in the word soon, third line from the bottom, attest to the strongly pathological sexuality of the sex offender. Period. And it's
AKA
like
bullshit.
Yeah. He's trying to meet his word count, He's writing his article, he's getting paid by the hour. Oh my God, it's ridiculous.
Yep. So they go on and on. The chief of police protests his men are wearing out. They're all working 12-hour shifts. They're searching crime scenes everywhere.
Yep.
They use a candy wrapper as their one clue.
Yeah.
And then they use this a pretty cool shot of a compass drawing concentric circles on a giant map.
Yes, creating
with
a
the
radius.
scene set in the middle.
Yeah.
And they go out, they interview a bunch of confectioners. Mickey Mouse is actually present in one. Good thing that
Well, Walt Disney was in Germany for a long time.
Americanism, modernity. Good thing that Disney's property lawyers weren't as effective back then. Witnesses are interviewed. They disagree with each other. We get a good use of this kind of in-your-face shot that Long seems to really like, where like somebody is lunging almost toward the camera and yelling at us. We see a couple of those. We'll see more of them in the future. They search railroad stations. They search what they call the criminal districts.
Mm-hmm.
We get some nice proto-noir shots of some of Berlin's darker and danker streets, complete with streetwalkers. And now we get up to the raid at the Crocodile Club.
Yeah, and at this point, as one of the wonderful criminals points out, there are more police on the streets than whores, so there's a problem.
This is Monday night. So.
Yeah.
This is an amazing scene, though, because it's shot in complete silence.
Yes.
Partly this was to cut the budget.
Yeah.
But it works great because we have this sense of like cars pulling up and formations of police marching down the street. It's all silent. It's all very ominous. It gives us a very military preparation feel. The silence is finally broken when there's a whistle, and the patrons in this underground club attempt to flee. But it's too late. The cops are here. There's only one exit. They're on their way down. There's got a great shot of a screaming, cursing woman bar patron or possibly prostitute being carried down the stairs.
Yeah.
I wrote down one lady's got a lot of spunk.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah.
And down the stairs comes our, I guess, kind of hero, Karl Loman.
Yeah.
Well, he's certainly a cop that they all seem to know.
Interestingly, like Beckert, he appears first as a shadow on the wall.
Yes. Yeah.
And then he comes up and he basically tells everyone to be quiet after they jeer him for a while. Obviously, everyone knows the guy. And he's, I guess, in some sense, a respected cop. He makes everybody line up. He makes everybody show their papers. This guy, by the way, I'll note for the character, he is played by an actor named Otto Wernicke, who will also appear as the same role as Karl Loman in The Testament of Dr. Mabuse in 1933.
He's phenomenal.
He would continue as an actor in Germany after the takeover by the Nazis, which was difficult for him because his wife was Jewish. But he managed to get around that with some kind of special permit and a large donation to the Nazi Party, and also being willing to appear in the Nazi propaganda epic Kohlberg. We will see other examples of this in the career of other peoples in this movie. That Nazis could be kind of pragmatic about it when popular entertainment was at stake.
Well, they're useful. So.
Yep, they are useful. And Wernicke was a fine actor, and he was useful for them in this way. So they're all down there. They're all forced to line up. There are repeated cries of Alex, Alex, which means that's where people are going. to the big police complex at Alexanderplatz. And he finds that most of these guys have fake papers or no papers, or they're criminal suspects in some other crime. There's a scene with a shady character being hauled out of the ladies' room by a uniformed cop.
Yeah.
Our date, we can tell from one of the confiscated newspapers, is now November 21st. And one of the greatest things I thought about this particular scene, aside from Loman, being funny with the criminal suspects, is we get an inventory shot. This is terrific. All the burglar tools, weapons, valuables, furs, wallets that are confiscated from this club or this bad guy bar or whatever it is that are lined up that the police have gotten. But no serial killer.
No, not what we're looking for.
At the end, we get a nice scene between a police captain and the barkeeper, who says that whoever's committing these murders is going to be he's going to be in real trouble if the crooks catch him. And she says, the girls here, this is a great speech, they solicit, but in each one of them beats a mother's heart. And there are some tough guys when they see the little ones at play. If they ever catch this guy, they'll make toothpicks out of him.
Yeah.
And I have a casting note here, by the way. This woman who plays the keeper of the Crocodile Club is Rosa Valletti, who's another really important figure, actually, in the Weimar cultural world. She had actually run herself a number of important Berlin cultural institutions. In the early 20s, she was the proprietress of something called the Café Größenwahn, or the Café Megalomania, which was one of the most important literary and political cabarets in Berlin. She's another link that this movie makes to Bertolt Brecht. In the corkboard of my mind with the strings and stuff, there's like there's a card for Bertolt Brecht, and there's a lot of strings running to that, which there's almost always going to be. She played the original Mrs. Peachum in the first stage production of the Threepenny Opera. And in addition to her cabaret and stage work, she appeared in a number of many important motion pictures. In this very year, she has a role in The Blue Angel. So she's a big deal, even if she has a small part. And she went into exile in 1933.
She delivers it so phenomenally, though.
Yeah, she's like a great tough girl.
Oh yeah, yeah, and her speech, it kind of encapsulates that. Like, look, the criminal element of Berlin, they pragmatically also want this guy gone, because look at you. The police are so ever present that we're no longer able to conduct business as usual.
Yeah, that's a running theme through this whole thing, where it's like the cops and the criminals both realize that they're both on just two different sides of the same coin. They have different businesses, and they both know what they're in for. But this guy is just fucking everything up for both of them.
Yep. Yeah, it's a huge problem for both sides.
So what do we cut to now? We're half an hour into the movie. A lot has happened.
Yeah.
Now we're inside a bad guy apartment.
Yeah.
Just to say, it's kind of a typical bourgeois apartment, but there are a lot more pictures of naked women on the walls than you would expect in a more respectable establishment. One of the guys is looking out the window. He's seeing
that fucking Blu-ray really paid off, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. I love Blu-ray because
Same.
especially when watching a movie by someone like Fritz Lange, who was so painstaking with every detail.
I mean, not like Faustus. You keep mentioning the date, right? And if you go and look at the calendar back in November of 1930, Monday was the 17th, right?
Yep.
It all lines up accurately. It wasn't just, to show time as passage either. Fritz Lange was, attention to detail. Whew,
in one of the interviews on the disc with Howard Nebensal, who is the son of the producer, and who was about 8 years old, he thinks, at the time that he was taken to see the set and to meet Fritz Lange. He said he was actually apparently on the set when the scene at the Crocodile Club was being filmed.
Oh, wow.
And Lange saw something on the table, which was basically a cigar burning in an ashtray. And he said that pile of ashes is not enough.
Wow.
This is not sufficient for the kind of place that is. This is good. There would be a lot more ashes. So
they're not dumping out the ashtrays every time they bring you a drink.
So everyone on the set had to stop while Fritz Lange picks up this cigar and smokes away to make more ashes to pile them up in the ashtray, so that they can then go and take that shot that looks to his mind like it ought to look. So I guess that's the kind of guy I guess Fritz Lange was.
Yeah, he had a vision.
Didn't he also use real criminals too? I think
possibly.
I read that. Yeah,
I think he probably. Well, in Berlin was full of underworld figures, so it's sort of, it wouldn't have been hard to avoid them if you wanted to have a lot of, as they would say, background.
Right? I'm reminded of Uwe Boll in Blood Rain when he couldn't find.
When I read that, that's what I thought too. Yeah, why go out and pay an actor? Just go out and get some guy who's really a pickpocket.
Actresses to be nude, so he hired prostitutes. Oh man! So the great minds think alike, Tim.
Yeah.
You a Boll, you hack.
So anyway, there are truckloads of people being carried away from the Crocodile Club.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for the arrival of some ominous master criminal figure. They call it Der Schenker, the safecracker. They're going to have some kind of meeting.
You know what you have to do before the meeting, though, Faustus?
Sorry?
You know what you have to do before the meeting, though, Faustus, is everybody should probably call, get the time, and synchronize their watches.
Yes, and there's a character called the Pickpocket with Taschendieb. He calls like some government office where someone tells him that the time is 2:58 in the morning.
Well, you used to do that. There used to be a number that you could call up and get the time and get the weather.
Popcorn time.
But they probably didn't connect you to like a live person. It was like a recording, right?
Right.
No, but I do remember you used to be able to call up the operator and ask him what time it was too, and they wouldn't like yell and scream at you or hang up. They would tell you what the time was.
Well, we're a protected monopoly. We can do that. But he pulls out his watch. Then he pulls out another watch. Then he pulls out another watch. Then he pulls out another watch. And he synchronizes them all. He's a pickpocket. So
I love some of the humor elements in this movie. Hit so well, by the way.
Yep. There's another guy in the corner. He's called the Fallspieler. He's playing with doctored cards.
Yeah.
There's a character named Franz, a burglar who's sitting in the corner in Broods.
You mean the guy who looks like Charlie Bronson?
Yeah.
And then there's another crime guy. He's he's called Gauran Finga, or the con man. He's played by what is probably like the most interesting actor here, other than Gustav Grinden, who he's another link to Brecht. He had played Macheath in the Three Penny Opera. He had an affair and apparently a child with Brecht's wife Marianne Zoff. And he married Zoff shortly after she divorced Brecht. His marriage to Zoff would create problems for him when the Nazis came to power. But again, this is another case where he was useful enough that they were willing to look the other way. The guy's name is Theo Lingen. He also appears in Testament of Dr. Mabuse. So all these Berlin crime lords are hanging around. Franz tells a story about Schenker, who once escaped a bank robbery where he's surrounded by the Scotland Yard. And when it was all over, there were 3 dead men on the ground, but he wasn't one of them. The bell rings. It's Schenker. He refuses to enter the apartment until someone draws the blinds.
Yes, very smart.
Yep.
Yes, good move.
When this happens, he comes in, and now a meeting happens. And the meeting is cross-cut in an amazing way.
Yes.
With another meeting taking place, presumably at the same time, with the top people in the Berlin police.
And I just have here The Wire You Hack, portraying the criminal element and the police department in similar fashions.
It's the misery of mismanagement, but unlike The Wire, this is the smokiest pair of meetings I think have ever been put on film.
Eddie, didn't I say something to you about I couldn't believe the amount of smoke that they generated in this fucking movie? It was incredible.
Not even the amount of smoke, the diversity of smoking vessels. I mean,
I never knew there was cigar holders.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
I was like, that guy put a fucking cigar in his pipe. Was he stupid fucking drunk? But then when you see those beer steins,
oh yeah,
I might put my cigar in my pipe too.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know I think that probably was designed to work that way. Everyone in these meetings is smoking, except for Schrenker. Schrenker is not smoking. And I got to tell you, Schrenker is the most charismatic badass in this
God
movie.
damn it, he is.
He's a
He is-
safecracker. So
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
criminal element, he's like the top of the line, right? He's like the
this-
professor.
He
He's
looks
not, you
like he looks like the Aryan Superman.
Yeah.
And he's got his badass black leather coat. He has black leather gloves, which he apparently never takes off. He wears a bowler hat most of the time. I thought that's McHeath, right? That's the top gangster right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as it turns out, he is played by Gustav Grinden,
Hmm.
who is one of the most influential of 20th century German actors.
Yes.
He appeared in this role. He also played Mephistopheles in Faust in
Mhm.
1960. Very famous. And he seems to be close to the center of the German cultural elite as just about anybody. He married for a couple of years one of the daughters of Thomas Mann. He and Paul Falkenberg, who was the editor to this movie, snarked about it. He said, it must not have been much of a marriage because Grüngens was one of the biggest homosexuals in town. He worked with Otto Klemperer at the Kroll Opera. His role in the Nazi era is hotly disputed. He was the artistic director of the Prussian State Theater and a member of the Reichstheaterkammer, and seems to have enjoyed the protection of the time
Yeah.
of both Goering and Goebbels, which is a little unusual when you're one of the biggest homosexuals in town. But again, this is another example
But
of
again,
pragmatism.
useful. Yep.
Yep. He appears to have intervened to have saved the life of the famous communist actor Ernst Bush
Oh wow.
from execution in 1943. And Bush would return the favor after the war to get Grüngens out of custody of the NKVD because they had him at that time.
Huh.
So, and but he brings he just really brings it for this movie.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, he's somebody that everyone's going to be afraid of, but sort of admire.
Yeah. Yeah, he
And he-
played fucking Mephistopheles. I mean, come on.
Yeah. You got to be able to steal the scene if you can do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have these cross-cutting meetings. Everyone is coming with ideas of various terribleness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to come up with how are we going to find this guy?
But a big, handsome reward, right? That'll do it.
Let's put an article in the newspaper disavowing any connection with that sort of thing.
Maybe more
the-
ID
the-
checks, more informants.
The crooks have like a different problem from the cops, which is that the cops are making it impossible for them to live.
Right.
And so there's the element of time then. But for the police, time is mounting up, and the political situation is becoming worse. People smoke and smoke, and then eventually, I can't believe how much people smoke. I shouldn't keep coming back to it, but it's just astonishing.
Faustus, it is incredible the amount. I've never in my life. I can't believe how anybody, even a smoker, and I was a smoker for like 35 fucking years. I would not be able to. I would be like, I got to get out of here and get some fucking fresh air and have a cigarette outside at least.
So I enjoy cigars, and recently I've converted over to a pipe, and that for me is maybe
That's a picture I want to see.
once every
You
2
with the
weeks.
pipe.
Oh yeah, I look very dapper. Yeah, but maybe I'll go to that well maybe once every 2 weeks. You have a nice scotch or I suppose I should in honor of Beckett here switch over to cognac. But man, these guys, through this entire movie, just the amount of smoke, ridiculous.
But this scene, I think, is probably his peak smoke.
Oh yeah.
Like you can almost not see. It's hard to sometimes see people's faces.
Yeah.
And you have it on Blu-ray, so Jesus Christ.
So anyway, they come to conclusions. For the cops, we're going to go and ask every insane asylum, every nervous clinic, everyone who might have released somebody, as a non-threat to come to us and say who they are and where they are. That's a Silence of the Lambs tactic, by the way. So Jonathan Demme, you hack. And then the crooks come up with a much more interesting and creative idea, which is that we have to put the entire city under surveillance. How are we going to do that?
Right.
And we have this great overhead shot with the same map we saw with the cops before, except with Grüngens, with the Schrenker's open hand in its black leather glove, sitting on the center of Berlin. It looks like a black leather spider, going through the streets. And he says, I have an idea. Who can be seen all the time without ever raising suspicion? Beggars.
Yeah.
We are going to enlist the beggars, the Bettler, the Organisation der Bettler. We're going to get them to watch the city.
John Wick, you hack.
Yeah.
So, and then we see that in the organization, and he says it's an interesting idea. And by the way, it's another like callback, I think, to Brecht, because of course, who is the most biggest organization in London in the Threepenny Opera? The Beggars.
Yeah.
They're the problem there. They're the threat. Here they're just observational. And of course they have a giant organization.
Yeah.
And we go to the Beggar Headquarters, which looks pretty
I love this fucking scene. Yeah.
Looks pretty dope actually for like beggars. I mean,
Yeah.
And they got a sense of a
Pretty
nice
nice.
sense of humor too with some of the signs they have
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah.
Credit is dead. They have smokes and they have beer, they have
Yeah.
sandwiches.
Well, the guy has cigarettes. He has them like in all stages, like from how close down, burnt down to the butt they are, to like perfect ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you got the two people at the table who are like fucking doling out food that they must have found in the garbage, whether or not it's edible. So I thought it was really good. And then the sign where it says "No beggars."
Yeah.
Right. Well, they're selling those sandwiches. Did you know you see the blackboard? Like
Yeah.
they actually have prices, fluctuating
Yeah,
prices.
because I think he says something like liverwurst. There's not a demand for it, so it went down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, this is a parody of like the stock exchange, essentially.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Supply and demand, right?
It's the underworld parodying the overworld, I suppose you might say.
It's all capitalism all the way down.
So yeah, that's a very Brechtian sentiment, by the way.
Yeah.
So anyway, you have a scene. This is like a great parody because you have a long line of beggars, the down and out of society who are lining up to get recruited and enlisted in this observational army being created by Berlin's organized crime.
Right.
And they actually come up to the desk. They have their beggar organization. They give their organization number, and then they get assignments. And this, I think, is actually a parody of recruiting from the First World War at the beginning. People line up. But we see the consequences because the person that they are enrolling, someone who gives his name is Emil Dustermann, has a peg leg.
Yeah.
Probably a war wound.
Yeah.
Or probably meant to be inferred to be a war wound.
Right.
But they sign him up. The guy who does it has very nice handwriting as well. Everyone in this movie has better handwriting than yes, we do. So, and he goes, and now we have the city is under surveillance.
Yeah. And yet the irony, though, that the person who will cause the killer to become unstuck is a marred beggar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's the balloon man.
Yes.
As we'll get to.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, just the irony of you have the guy with the peg leg. And who ends up being the informant with the information that's needed? Well, it's a blind man.
Yep.
Yeah.
The ear witness.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one who can't see that Peter Lorre looks like a regular, normal ass person. That even if you looked at him, you would never in a million years think that he was the one who did it.
Yeah.
Yep. So we go out in the street, and organ grinder is organ grinding away. A blind man, quote, supposedly blind, gets a donation.
Well, hold on, Faustus, sorry, because when the organ grinder's playing, there's a group of kids all around him, but they're all like 10 or 15 feet away from him, and when he finishes, they throw the coins at him
Yeah.
from like 20 fucking feet away. So like
Yeah, I
all
saw
the
that.
kids are staying away from all the adults.
Good call. Yes,
Good call.
definitely. But I love the scene where there's also like a supposedly blind beggar with his dog getting a donation from a girl being walked to school. And then it turns out he's not so blind because he turns and watches them.
Right.
And the dog turns and watches
Yeah, the dog
them.
looks too.
I really like that. I love that dog. He's so on the job. They're all outside. They're everywhere. And then we have this montage of bourgeois Berliners going about their business, window shopping, and they're just completely unaware of all the beggars who are around them watching.
Oh,
And I have a note here too. Those are some incredible fucking windows.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
With the fucking Ferris wheel going, all that other shit. The bookstore later on that has the fucking arrow on the fucking rubber
Yeah,
band pointing up and down in a book.
The advertisements in the windows, I mean, they're next level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're back. Back at police headquarters, Loman is doing what he does best, which is reading a report. He corrects its spelling. Um, and, he notes that there is a rough writing surface used to make the letter, that it was red or colored pencil lead.
Yes.
That was used to the letter to tempo. Ah, clues. Then he gets a bunch of memoranda from hospitals and insane asylums about released patients. This is used to generate a list of possible suspects to run to Earth. So we see the police doing their thing. They're being methodical. They're going through records. They're a bureaucracy. That's what they are. And it leads immediately to the next scene where we have Inspector Graber going to the house of one Elisabeth Winkler, who, as it happens, is Hans Beckert's landlady.
Yes.
And a little hard of hearing.
A little hard of hearing,
yeah.
but nice.
Kindly, yeah. Maybe a little involved in everybody's business, but, only because she cares.
It's kind of her job, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he says, well, I'm from the tax office.
Yeah, I love this. Of course, you can't say you're a cop, right?
Right.
Well, what's going to scare you more? Which one are you going to try to please more? If he tells you he's a cop or he's from the tax office and you own that apartment building and you're renting it out.
And Tim, that's the note that I have in here is if somebody comes to my house and says they're with the police, let them in. If they say they're from the tax office, shoot them.
And it was nice knowing you, Eddie. I'll see you in 15 to 20 years.
Right.
Oh, wait. People who...
So, he goes to wait to actually search the room.
Yeah.
Frau Winkler brings him a newspaper so we can know what date it is.
So the note that I have, he goes to search, right? So he sits down, he stands up to begin to search, and then he hears her coming back in with the newspaper and sits down really quick, like, oh, she caught me. I don't want her to see me snooping around. That's so well done.
Yep. So, he gets a newspaper. We now know the date is November 24th.
Yeah.
We cut to Beckert, who's out on the street.
Yeah.
He's buying himself an apple. Well, back at the apartment, again, we get one of these cross-cuts showing different actions taking place at the same time. Graber checks out the table. Not the right kind of table. Too smooth.
Yeah.
Views the windowsill, doesn't understand its significance immediately.
Right.
Goes through the trash. Finds a couple of things. Beckert, meanwhile, is at one of these fantastic windows.
Yeah. With
he's at a cutler shop.
So, and the thing that I have that it at this point, I said, wow, this reminds me in the club when the police had spread out all of the contraband, right? All of the various stolen equipment. It's so ornate the way that the silverware is laid out in this window. This is such a beautiful shot.
Because he's looking and he sees reflections.
Yeah.
And he sees a little girl. After in the reflection in the window of the cutler shop, and she's framed by a display of knives, which is terribly ominous.
Yeah.
And he waits. He watches her go. Then he proceeds to follow her. He's whistling his tune.
But before this, he's eating an apple while he's looking at her in the reflection, right? And it seeing her reflection almost it almost unnerves him, right?
Yeah, I have written that it almost kind of looks like he's trying to fight it.
And he starts stretching his lips on the right side of his face a bit in the reflection and kind of rocking back and forth. And then, he looks back up, though, and she is gone. And that's, as you said, Faust, is when we cue the whistling and he walks away.
Yep. But he's walking away in pursuit.
Yes.
She passes the bookstore that Tim mentioned before with the moving arrow, providing what is possibly this movie's grossest piece of sexual symbolism. And then,
as well as
so of course I
Uzumaki.
picked it up.
So
we have
the little girl meets her mother, who sort of scolds her slightly for being away.
Yeah.
And Beckert has to break off his pursuit, so he goes across the street to a cafe, and he orders coffee. No, cognac.
Yeah.
he feebly whistles Hall of the Mountain King, or possibly only hears it in his head. It's not clear.
Yeah, because he's kind of obscured by like a tree.
Vines.
Well, there's
vines,
one
yes.
scene where you see through the vines, and it doesn't look like he's moving his mouth to whistle, but you still hear the whistling, and then he starts to move his lips like he's whistling. So I don't know if that was just the dubbing on the version that I saw, or if he's supposed to be hearing it in his head.
And plus,
Peter Lorre couldn't whistle. You know
wow.
who actually did the whistling?
Huh?
Who dubbed in for him?
Who?
Thea von Harbo.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh? So the Fritz Lange's wife, the co-writer. Huh? Interesting. Yeah, and I have the other note that I have here is like you said, the whistling is feeble and it's broken up. It doesn't sound correct.
Mm-hmm. He gets his cognac, he downs it, single swallow, orders another immediately, downs it. He obviously has something he needs to like try to quench, or something he needs to soothe.
Some compulsion, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see him screened up. One of the commenters once said behind these vines, he looks like an animal in the jungle.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point.
On the hunt, yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Meanwhile, bureaucracy continues back at police headquarters.
Yeah.
Inspector Graber is giving his report on Hans Beckert's apartment to Karl Loman. There isn't much to report, but there is the presence of something.
Yeah.
Ariston cigarettes in the trash.
That's it.
And Loman remembers something. He's sitting there. Ariston. So he calls up and gets a file on another earlier victim of Beckert named Marga Perl.
Yep.
And he goes through it, and but we cut back to, now it's really heating up. We get back to the blind in the balloon cellar.
Yes.
Somebody's walking by, whistling this tune from the Hall of the Mountain King.
And immediately the blind man recognizes it. He recognizes it, and he, wait a minute, hold on. I remember hearing that the day the little girl went missing. So he tries feebly to follow, right? Because unlike our previous blind beggar, he actually is blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not fooling.
He goes on to follow, but he's not doing a very good job of it. So what do? Well, you tap out. You call in a friend. And he shouts for his friend Heinrich. And he says, Heinrich, there's someone whistling. Do you hear him? He says, yeah. He says, oh, but he just stopped. But do you see him? Heinrich says, yeah, I do. I still see him. He's walking down the street with a little girl. And the blind beggar says, yeah, the day that girl went missing, a person who was whistling like that with a little girl came and bought a balloon from me. And that's all the evidence Heinrich needs.
That's it. It's good enough to follow him, right? That's what they're getting paid, supposedly getting paid for from the mafia or the gangsters.
Yeah.
Plus, also, I noticed something weird. The blind guy, he has an armband on with like 3 circles on it.
I don't know the reference. I saw that too, and if I had more time, I would have tried to look it up.
If anybody has
it's kind of like something that people, like maybe handicapped people, wore back then. It's like a symbol, like I'm blind, be careful. Like,
maybe
possibly.
Maybe it was like the Live Strong band that everybody used to wear to.
But he is already wearing a sign that says blind.
Yeah, literally around his neck. It just has the word blind on it.
Yeah, but people don't read.
That's true. They could be illiterate, so I guess you need the band.
This is the most literate culture in the world. There are 140 daily newspapers in 1930.
That's true.
We are at the point where Beckert has been identified. He's been fingered.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a shot of this pursuing Heinrich, watching Beckert buying a little girl something in an exotic fruit shop. Then Beckert and the girl come out. They're talking on the street. He's watching from across the street. The little girl cutely curtsies to Beckert and addresses him as Onkel, which the Criterion Collection subtitles perhaps a bit prudishly translate as Mr. Beckert takes out a knife.
Switchblade,
Yep, but it's only to cut an orange. The sighted man, Heinrich, chalks an M onto his hand. Then he crosses the street, pretends to slip on the orange peel that Beckert just threw on the ground, slaps him on the back of the coat, rebukes him for littering, and then goes on his way. And then in another really creepy moment, this little girl picks up Becker's switchblade and hands it back to him.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because he drops it when a guy bangs into him.
Yep.
Faustus, another note that I have here with the chalking the hand and marking his shoulder with the letter M. Of course, you got into some of the reasons why maybe the marking of the letter M was used, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this method, though, of chalking and marking someone's shoulder, this was something that was actually very common in the carnival.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why they call them marks.
Exactly. So they would, put a little chalk mark on a drunk or somebody that they knew that they could fleece and take advantage of and call them marks.
Mm-hmm.
So,
meanwhile, back at police headquarters, Loman is reading a report again. And he notes that about 50 meters from the crime scene where Margaret Pearl was found. And now the Inspector Graber remembers something. The windowsill in Becker's room has the right pattern to match the hatching in the letter that was sent to the newspaper.
The windowsill.
Aha. So, both Loman and Graber return to the apartment. They check the windowsill. It's the right kind. And Graber finds red pencil lead. Loman responds, Herr Gott, endlich, we know. We have someone we can find.
Yeah.
But the chase is already on, and the police are behind because a phone call is coming into the bad guy apartment. The beggars have found their killer. And now we have another creepy montage with criminals and beggars chasing Becker through the streets, playing cat and mouse.
Yeah. And doing a handoff, almost like a relay race, right? Mm-hmm. So that one person isn't following him too long as to arouse suspicion.
Smart move. Cops do that, right?
Yep. So, Beckert and his prey stop at a toy store. She notices the letter M on his shoulder, and Beckert realizes he's being pursued.
Yeah.
So he breaks off and he runs. We see an overhead shot, another one of these ominous, deeply silent shots, where he's surrounded. He sees three pursuers closing in on him, but he manages to duck into an office building.
Well, he disappears behind a bus for like a split second, doesn't he?
A fire engine.
Yeah.
And then he ducks into the building. Meanwhile, time is going on. A clock strikes 5. Office workers begin to pour out of the building. And then the building is closed up for a night, and a security guard salutes a passing policeman.
Yeah.
There is a coordination between the beggars and the crime lords. Inside the building, a security guard notices that a door is ajar to the attic storage space for the offices. Beckert is hiding inside a storage closet amidst various junk.
And we have a great building of tension here because the beggars who were trying to watch over, this building, they're aware that at the strike of 5, this mob of people is going to leave, and Becker could very easily escape in this mob, And until it is revealed that he's hiding in the storage area, you as the viewer, you don't know, right? He could have been gone. He could.
Yeah, that's the smart thing they do. That's what you would assume that he would do, is either wash his coat off or take his coat off and just get out when you have 500 people leaving the office at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. But as you said, Faustus, he did not. He hides himself in a dingy, dirty storage area. And it's almost like a prison cell, too, with the bars and the lock on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the criminals mobilize, and at 11 o'clock, a policeman, supposedly, shows up outside to hail security to complain about the gate.
Yeah.
The gate is fine, but that's not the issue. The policeman is Schrenker, dressed as a policeman. He basically hijacks his way into the building with a gun.
Yep.
And then with a whistled signal, you got this huge army of crooks pouring into the building.
Yeah, with a whistle, not just a signal, though, with a tune, right? So now we have the shadowy figures pursuing him, whistling their own song.
A different tune.
Yep.
Schrenker successfully tortures a guard into surrendering details of the building's security. And then Beckert is stuck in his little closet upstairs, and he's locked, and he's trying to escape. He's got his knife.
Yeah.
Trying to pull out the lock, but breaks his knife's blades.
Yeah.
the crooks come into the building. They take out the other watchman, and then they begin a search.
Yeah. And we cut to what else but another clock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because now they literally have to beat the clock every time, right? Because somebody has to go around and place the watchman, turning the key on the clock to make sure the alarm doesn't go off at the police station.
Importantly, make sure that the clock is set to the appropriate time. Otherwise, the police will be alerted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Schrenker he gives Franz the order to break into the offices, one of the offices, by drilling through the ceiling.
Yeah.
The door might be wired. So Franz does. Meanwhile, someone hears tapping coming from the attic as they're going around setting the clocks. And we cut and we see Beckert trying to take a nail that he's extracted from like one of the lock mechanisms into a lockpick to try to pick the lock to get out of the storage bin that he's been locked into.
Yeah, he's trying to bend it around like the ledge of a step with the butt end of his knife, of his broken knife, to try to make that nail have a 90-degree bend in it.
Yep.
Well, I think later on we're going to see the key that actually fits into the lock, and he almost got it right with the fucking nail, just bending it like that.
Yeah, he almost nailed it.
Yep.
Oh, God. No soundboard for that one?
No.
Come on. That one deserved it.
Well, meanwhile, Schrenker and his gang head up, and there's a brief chase through the darkened attic space. Schrenker has a key he took them from the guards. And the excited news, meanwhile, spreading downstairs back to the guard station, where one of the watchmen revives just long enough to trigger an alarm. Uh-oh. So now there are two races against the clock. The criminals upstairs are trying to grab Beckert and then get the hell out of the building before the police show up.
Yeah, it is a fantastic building of tension, right? Because the police are supposedly going to be there within 5 minutes, and the criminals have, of course, gotten into the storage facility where Beckert is hiding in one of these storage units.
Like there's 6 different storage areas.
Yeah.
They say.
And the criminals almost give up at this point, right? They almost
do.
We have to go.
Schrenker has nerves of steel.
Yeah.
He keeps
He's
them going.
safecracker, right?
Yep. He keeps them going until they actually get the guy. The Peter Lorre's eyes and the way that they're shot and the way that they're lit is fantastic in this scene.
Oh, yeah.
He's wide open eyes, the sense of sheer animal fear that seems to be radiating out, because Beckert knows that something very bad is about to happen to him.
Yeah.
And so, but the hit he gets got, they carry him out of the building, running out. He's all tied up and wriggling and struggling. And then we cut to a montage of the damage that's been done in the building. Tied up watchman, knocked indoors. And somebody forgot Franz.
Poor Franz.
Left him in the hole.
Oh, and it's so great, too, because we just see Franz from the hole looking up, saying, hey, who pulled the rope up? Can you guys throw the rope back down? So somebody does, unseen, off camera. And he begins climbing up the rope, gets to the top of it, and realizes, shit, it's the police. And they tell him, put your hands up. And he looks around and he says, well, I mean, I'm holding on to the rope. I can't really put my hands up.
Again, another little bit of sense of humor in the movie.
Almost literal gallows humor.
All right, so now Franz is basically in the soup. And he's being interrogated by like some guy, an inspector who probably deals with, burglaries of this kind.
Yeah.
And it's all baffling to them. And he's trying to say, look, buddy, you broke into we collared you. Aren't you mad about being left in the lurch by all your friends? But Franz, of course, who's probably spent most of his life in and out of various kinds of legal trouble, is sort of wise to this ploy. He said, look, what's going to happen to me? Nothing was taken.
Yeah.
There's just a little property damage. And so, this fails. The burglar talks to one of the night watchmen, who, identifies, who clearly says, look, I clearly heard someone say to another person, we have him.
Yeah, they're looking for somebody.
Yep, they're looking for somebody.
Yeah, and that he was
So the B&I guy gets a clever idea. He says, I'm going to call up Loman. So we see Loman. He calls up Loman. He's in his office. He's drinking the day.
Yeah.
And the ploy here is a pretty obvious one. All right, he's going to get Loman, who's the murder police, not the burglary police, play along with the ruse to the effect that one of the guards has been killed.
Yeah.
One of your boys did it too well. And then we have a montage, you have a shot, quick, very way. Just like the Watchman sitting there eating like a huge meal, drinking a huge beer.
Don't worry, he's alive.
Incredible looking sausage, an amazing looking mug of beer. I'm jealous
It's
of
the
this
biggest
man.
fucking that's not even a fucking stein. That's a goblet of beer, right?
Punch bowl with a handle.
Yeah, these guys.
That's a gulp of beers.
These guys drink beer by the liter.
Yeah.
Basically. So he says, you're now in real trouble, right? Because this is murder, all right? And so Franz, does not like the idea of what's going to happen to him if he gets convicted for murder. So he breaks and he says, look, we were looking for someone. We were looking for the child killer.
Yeah.
And that makes Loman not so smug.
Yeah, he spits out a cigar.
His cigar just drops out of his mouth. His expression changes. He's so overcome he has to actually run out of the room.
Yeah.
And wash up.
Well, and he reaches up to extract the cigar from his mouth. He didn't even notice that it fell out of his mouth, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, just imagine if you're this cop with all the pressure that he has on him, and this just falls into your lap.
I mean, this is it, right? This is the big one.
Or the closest thing to the big one that you've ever had so far, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the things, there's a small detail, by the way, that I noticed in one of these shots, which is that there is actually a bed in Logan's office.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
He's been living in his office for this case.
Yeah.
That's how stressful the whole thing has been. So he comes back out and he says, okay, you got to tell me, where were you taking this guy? And Franz explains that they're taking something called the Kunz and Levy Distillery, an organization that went bankrupt, presumably about 7 years before. We get some shots of a very scary looking industrial ruin, which I guess is meant to be the distillery. So now the criminal underworld is gathering.
Yeah.
A deep and ominous vaulted brick space.
Basically, it's the place where the end of Hostel took place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Or it's reminiscent of a dungeon, really.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
Yep. And, they pull Beckert out of whatever space they're holding him, and he's screaming at the warders, this is a mistake, you can't do this to me, what is going on? And then Laurie turns around, and he sees something like 200 criminals all lined up behind Shrinker.
Oh, yeah,
in the middle.
Place is packed.
Yeah.
And there's a slow pan across all these underworld figures. They're all dead silent.
Yeah.
And he just bugs out.
It is ominous. I mean, and it is one of the most intimidating shots I've seen in a film in a long time.
Well, you have to figure, even though they're criminals, whatever, they still despise him, because what's the lowest thing that you can be in prison? Somebody who does fucked up shit to kids.
Well,
and even though they must have kids, so they must have been afraid for their own kids, and now they finally got them in their own hands.
So I would say that it's half that. I would say that it is half, yes, this person is killing children, and the other half of it is this person is bringing the police onto us.
Oh, so yeah, definitely.
Opportunistically, we need to get rid of this man.
Yeah, but you see the revulsion that they're looking at him too. So it's let's say it's 50-50. Look, it's a good thing. It works out for both things for them, right?
Yeah. It's a happy coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just have that he's screaming at them, calling them swine initially. They throw him down these stairs. He sees, like you said, at least 200 men. And he begs, he pleads for mercy from them.
Mm-hmm.
And someone puts his hand on his shoulder, and it's the blind man.
Right. The old blind vendor, and his words are, "Das ist kein Irrtum." This is no error. And he shows Beckert the balloon identical to the one that he sold when Beckert was leading Elsie Beckert astray. Or Elsie Beckman astray.
And this balloon, I don't know if we said it before, but this is a balloon shaped like a kid.
Yeah. And it's very important, though, if you're going to have a trial like this, you at least want to have an eyewitness.
That's why you use it? For real?
Well, I think the irony is not lost, right? A blind man is their eyewitness, but...
Well, no, I think my interpretation of it is the guy who can't see is the one who catches him because, like I said, he's not fooled by looking like somebody who looks like Peter Laurie. That's not somebody who you're going to think is this terrible fucking devil going around killing kids and getting away with it and scoffing at the police and everybody in fucking Germany is looking for him. You're not going to think it's Peter Laurie. But just hearing him and being able to put two and two together, the blind man is the one who figures it out.
Yeah, but this this court scene isn't so much a court scene. It's it's a kangaroo court, of course. We already know how this is going to turn out for him.
They're just going through the formalities of it. They're trying to give themselves a clean conscience.
Right.
But they did give him defense counsel. I don't know what this is actually supposed to mean or what their motivation is. Exactly. These are not people who seem to have much of a conscience, but
yeah, but you can't say, Faustus, you can't say all 200 of those people that are in there are all hardened murderers, right? There's pickpockets in there, there's con men, all that shit.
No,
so
just the lead prosecutioner.
I think this is something that's just like to get them all like, well, we all are in it. We agreed on it. It's been done to us because I think there's a line where they've all been in jail from either 6 weeks to 60 years. Mm-hmm. So they all know the law and all that stuff, and they're just doing their own justice, and this is going to clear their conscience. We didn't just kill this guy.
In the dub that I have, there is the comment, each one of us is a legal expert, as each one of us has served at least 6 months in prison. So we'll treat you right. And in fact, we have a defense counsel set up for you. And this poor, I think this might be satire on the actual legal system, right? Like if you're poor and if no one is on your side, who is going to come to your defense? Just some beleaguered person buried in bookwork. You're the 19th person he's defending today.
This guy kind of does a decent job of it. At least if he's bullshitting, he's doing a good job of bullshitting. Yeah.
So so his defense counsel is the moral center of the film, I would say, right? Because he brings up to me morally the only proper argument, which is killing a man is wrong, right? And the argument that we have here, and I think what the greater point, or the greater narrative of this film is pointing to is the death sentence ever truly moral, right?
We'll say no.
Yeah. So, and that you would agree with the defense counsel here then, right?
Yes, but again, see, what's always crazy like that is you always ask people, and then when you bring it home with like, well, if it's somebody that you know, what are you going to do? But
right.
What you count on with the justice system and the government is that they don't think like that. So that there is that separation, and they're supposed to be like, if somebody is crazy and they did something, do you kill them? If it's something that they can't control, that they had no control over doing?
Right, and that's specifically his defense, right? The speech that I put an excerpt from in the intro to this, that's basically what he's talking about, right?
Laurie.
Faustus, and what is the speech? Go ahead.
Well, I didn't transcribe the speech, but it basically, because I can't do it justice. This is one of the This is one of the most extraordinary performances I think ever laid down.
Yeah.
And Laurie goes from showing one of the most amazing displays of abjection and terror to this pronouncement that he cannot control himself, that he hears essentially voices in his head making demands that he do what he does.
Yeah.
And then, he's trying to run from himself, but he can't. And that running with him are all the ghosts of those whom he has killed. And he sees in the streets announcements. He's referring to these placards again. discussions of what he has done. And so it's an appeal. He says, I am not in control. I'm a victim here as well.
And he has some people in the audience shaking their heads like they're agreeing with them.
There appears to be a certain amount of sympathy in the audience.
So
there is a kind of opposition here when you oppose defense counsel who says, look, absence of control means absence of culpability.
Right.
And this is like the voice of the law. This is the voice of the legal state. This would have been the law under Article 51 of the Criminal Code of the Republic of Germany. And so the defense counsel is arguing essentially the law of the state. Schrenker has a response, which is to say the fact that he cannot control means that he must be wiped out, that the only answer to someone like you is to eliminate this scary rhetoric, which is Nazi rhetoric, by the way.
Yeah.
It's essentially, we don't have time for legalistic discussions. We don't have time for this we can't allow this sort of humanitarian thing. Our survival demands, the elimination of certain kinds of people. And there's that argument or that dialectic. It's the most political moment in some ways of the movie. One of the most political moments anyway.
So I've pulled up the transcript of what he says, and I know I'm not going to do it justice, but for the listener, if you've not seen it, I'll give it a try. It's there all the time, driving me out to wander the streets, following me silently, but I can feel it there. It's me pursuing myself. I want to escape from myself. But it's impossible. I can't escape. I have to obey it. I have to run endless streets. I want to escape, to get away. And I'm pursued by ghosts of mothers and the children. They never leave me. They're always there. Always. Except when I do it. Then I can't remember anything. And afterwards, I see the posters, and I read what I've done, and I read. Did I do that? But I can't remember anything about it. But who will believe me? Who knows what it's like to be me? How I'm forced to act. How I don't want to, I don't want to, but must. And then a voice screams, I can't bear to hear it. I can't go on. I can't. This clearly is a rad dude,
You have to say end scene.
Scene, yeah. And so, like you said, Tim, and when he is reading this in a much better way than I can, because I'm not a fucking actor. I'm a terrible
Peter Laurie, yes.
podcaster. The crowd is stunned, and some of them, are swayed toward him. And it's interesting. What his defense says is, look, you, the prosecution, you're currently under investigation for 3 counts of manslaughter.
Oh, he just brushes that shit off 1, 2, 3. That's irrelevant.
No. It's got nothing to do with this. This man can't help it, though. He is a sick man. He needs a doctor, not an executioner. No one has the right to kill a man, not the state, and least of all of you. The state must render him harmless so that he is no longer a danger to society. And boy, the crowd does not love this. They guffaw, they boo, and a woman stands up. And she gives her impassioned speech. She says, look, you've never lost a child. You should ask the mothers. Right? And, that's rough, right? Because the loss of a child, I can't even imagine. I cannot.
And, well, again, that's what I mean. When it's personal, when it's something that happens to you, of course you are going to want to kill that person. There's no doubt about wanting to do that.
And so many people...
You don't want the justice system or the government to be that fucking hot-headed or fucking just spur of the moment do something like
And
that.
so many people opposed gay marriage until they had a gay child.
Oh yes, yeah. It's always
Yeah.
different once it hits home. When it's somebody that you know, that's when it's a whole different ball game.
When you humanize an issue, it becomes human.
And that's what he does with giving that speech. He humanizes himself because up to this point, they're just thinking he's the devil. That's either killing their business or killing their kids. But like you said, when he's giving that speech, he's got some of them nodding their heads because they know what it's like.
Yeah.
Maybe not to that crazy extent, but
it doesn't work. No.
well, no, mob mentality rules out.
Yeah. So there's in philosophy there's a theory that the problem with mob justice is that the level of intellect is dropped to the lowest member of the mob, right?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Or as George Carlin once put it, think of your average person and realize half of them are dumber than that. I don't know, Faustus. I feel like you've been quiet for a moment. I'll stop monologuing.
Well, I mean, no, this is fine. I think you've basically covered it really well. It's, it gets ugly at this point. There's a mob scene, but suddenly it breaks, right?
Yeah. And
someone must have shown up in really massive force.
Oh God, right? That's the only person who could stop them all in their tracks.
Yeah. Everyone puts up their hands, even Schranker.
He's the last one to do it, though. He really hesitates before he does it.
Yep. And we see Beckett, who's cowered, a hand reaches into the frame.
Yeah.
Puts it on his shoulder and begins a statement, "In Name des Gesetzes," in the name of the law. He's being arrested, this time by the real police. And we cut, and we're seeing a trial court. A head judge, followed by his assessors, comes in. He sits in Namen des Volkes, that is to say, in the name of the people, which is, I guess, the formula they will use for pronouncing judgment.
Yeah.
And then we cut, and we don't see what he has to say. Instead, what we see are three bereaved mothers. Yeah. Frau Beckmann in the middle, explaining that, she's explaining this will not bring our daughters back. We have to keep closer watch over the children, all of you. The very last word said after ihr, said after a pause. It's accusatory. Cut. And that's the movie. That's the way the German version ends.
Yep, that's it.
There's a different ending?
Yes, the French ending. There's a French ending and there's an English ending.
Let me guess which one had to clear it up 100% is what happened to him. The English one, right?
I don't think any of them actually happened, but I think that there are scenes of children playing at the end of both the other ones. In the French one, it simply reverts back to another count-out game among children, and then
the same one or a different one, or like a regular count-out game.
Well, I don't know if it's a similar one. I didn't see the beginning of the French one, so I don't know if it's the same version, but it's the same idea of like a bad man coming to get you. And then I'm trying to remember, in the English, it cuts to, I think, just happy children playing. So the German version is much starker.
Yeah. And you wonder what, first of all, the 180 that she has done from the beginning of, it's wonderful we can hear the kids playing, right? Even though what we hear is their foreboding, is their warning us that a bad man is going to come and kill us, to now we've found the bad man, right? And even whatever fate has befallen the bad man, it doesn't matter. That's not going to fix things. We need to keep a better eye on our children. The other note that I had, and I mean, of course, this is all just my opinion, is when she's talking about keeping an eye on the children, I don't think she's necessarily talking about keeping an eye on the children. She's saying we need to keep an eye on each other, right? Because these children grow to men and these men grow to what they become, right? So the other note that I have here, just really quickly at the end, is in 1934, Hitler banned this film in Germany.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Mob justice, the killing of people who maybe are mentally ill. Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that they had a problem with the permit from the Nazis, and they had to think they changed the name of the title of the movie.
Well, there was
to get their permit back.
I think that's what they said. There was a title. They originally had titled it "The Murderer Among Us."
Yes, that was the title first.
And I think there are versions of these stories that float around. One version is that this made the Nazis angry, and because they thought that it was a reference to them. So
isn't it amazing how bad people always think that when you talk about Nazis, it's a reference to them? But these were actual Nazis.
Well, yeah. And so there was pressure to change the name of the film. However, I think at least, the editor who who commented on it, I don't think that he thought that wasn't true. He thought that there was actually it was a conflict between other movies that were being released at the same time. And so they picked out M as just something that would stand out by itself.
Yeah.
Paul Falkenberg, I think, actually said this. He probably would have known because, he was central to the project. He was the editor.
Looking at the cover of it, too, at least the posters that floated for it, and the typical image that you see is the hand reaching up with the stark red M on it is very reminiscent of the kind of Dadaist era propaganda, right?
You could definitely see that as like a fucking recruiting poster.
Of course.
Just a little bit different.
Yeah, of its era. So that's the film M. And Tim, what do you think, buddy?
Oh, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad I found it on. I'm pretty sure it was Tubi. It disappeared really quick, and sat through it for almost 2 hours. It's just something to really behold. I can't do it justice. Smarter people than I have talked about the way that they filmed it and done all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just really striking to watch it. The way that they got away with, 100% what he's doing to those kids, and you don't see anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a drop of blood in this film, and yet it
that's what always makes it scary and worse. There's nothing that Fritz Lange could put on the screen that's going to be worse than what's in my imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and as a person with my two last working brain cells that rub together eventually, and sometimes come out with something, I would say I think that this film is like you said, Faust, is probably one of the predecessors to most of the world of horror and the world of the serial killer police procedural. You owe it to yourself to see it, even if you've never seen it, and we've spoiled the whole thing for you. We've done nothing.
Doesn't matter. Matter. The brilliance of this thing isn't how it concludes. The brilliance is the performances and the setups. Peter Laurie was, I think, only 27.
Yeah.
When he did his iconic scenes.
Oh yeah, this is the youngest I've ever seen him look.
Yeah, and phenomenal. That's the reason why I opened this with that cut of his dialogue. It's incredible.
And there's one part where he's trapped in that fucking cage thing where you almost have some sympathy for him. You can feel, like you said before, you could just see the terror in his eyes.
No, there are many times I feel sympathetic for him. I mean, even at the point where he's downing his cognacs, right? He is compulsed to do this, and he does not want to be that. He does not choose to be that. Yeah. I don't know. There are smart people that know about philosophy, and I'm stupid, so I'm not going to weigh in on it.
That's why you have people like Faustus on the show. Give us some education.
I just say, get this movie, get it in the highest resolution you can, because there's always something to see.
Yep.
The Blu-ray is, at least right now, unfortunately, appears to be out of print. So go lobby Criterion Collection to get it back in.
Yeah.
Because this, it repays repeated watching. I looked at it 4 times last week to try to get a sense of. Well, like I said, it repays repeated watching.
Yeah.
It goes by into clip too. It's almost an hour and 50 minutes, and it does not feel like an hour and 50 minute long movie.
No, not at all. I mean, there are some moments of it that drag for a moment, but goddamn, it is filmed so beautifully that who cares?
Long does a tutorial here on how to keep the movie going.
Yep.
Cutting between scenes, making the plot seem like it's really moving, keeping tension at a very high level. Like I said, time matters intensely in this movie, and Long shows us how to make it matter.
Yeah.
So if you are a aspiring screenwriter, if you are an aspiring director, this is something you need to watch over and over, because it's an explanation of how to make things go.
Yeah, there's no better example of building tension, I think, in cinema than this.
Oh, so I had a good pick. All right.
Yeah. Congratulations, Tim. You picked probably one of the top 10 films in history.
I was just tooting around Saturday afternoon, smoked a joint. Like, hey, I haven't watched them in a long time. Let's see what's up with this.
Sometimes that's the best time to find something, my friend. So, Faustus, before we go, what else should we pay attention to?
Oh, well, gee, that's kind of a broad question.
That directly involves you, sir.
Kind of a big world out there, and but in terms of, like, if this is the moment where I do the plug, over at eroticmadscience.com, the website that I run and commission a lot of work for, we're finishing up the storyboards for the Auto Icon screenplay, and in April we'll have 2 new treats for our readers. I've got a short run of illustrations called Organ Bell by my friend Raphael Suzarte. And then I have 2 radio plays, which I wrote because I was bored, and because, quarantine is boring. So I took my finished material and turned them into 2 audio dramas, which I have written up and will be publishing. And we will have illustration sequences for those, 15 illustrations each. Done by my guy Eros Arts, who's my general comic book artist. As always, if you send me your mailing address, maybe some other swag, you can reach me through the contact page at eroticmadscience.com, or you can DM me on Twitter. I'm at eroticmadsci, and I love to hear from you.
And Faustus, if you need any support, technologically or with whatever it takes to get your radio drama out there and put on the internet, of course, reach out to me.
I fucking love radio dramas.
Oh God, yeah. You've reached the right place for it. I will say, check us out at patreon.com/bloodybits. I'm going to give a special shout out to No Gutierrez, who is the best Patreon. All the other Patreons are below him.
They pale in comparison, I hear.
He signed up at the $20.01 level. That is higher than any other Patreon, except for the $20.02 level that we've recently opened up. And once somebody signs up at that level, then forget about you, No Gutierrez. Also, you can check out, we have a store for some of our merchandise at streamlabs.com/bloodybits, I believe.
Yeah, you get to see there's a t-shirt with you and me on it.
Yeah, there is. There certainly is, because we like fun, Tim.
Who doesn't like fun? And wouldn't you like to wear fun?
Wouldn't you like to wear fun? And other than that, of course, check out both of our sister podcasts, the Mustachio Podcastio, which had a phenomenal episode come out very recently about Jungle to Jungle, and The Grind Bin.
I love that episode.
And The Grind Bin, definitely check that out, but you're going to get a very drunken Daniel.
He wasn't that drunk. He says he was drunk, but he wasn't that bad.
Okay.
Take it from me.
I'll go along with that. Tim, do you have anything you would like to point people's attention to?
I'm on half an episode of Daniel's podcast of Congo because my internet went out half an hour into the goddamn show.
Damn it.
We didn't get to the part where they started singing California Dreaming. That was like the whole reason I wanted to do the whole fucking episode.
I love that song.
And I know I got like almost a whole month coming up on the Grind Bin.
Wow.
Yeah,
Finally.
so
a month of
everything's
Tuesdays.
coming up Yobo.
Everything's coming up Yobo. So I think this